there's so many podcasts that feel like, oh, like tell us about what you do. Tell us, about, tell us your story, blah, 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 like all that. And I'm like, oh, that's important. But then every podcast kind of just became like a thing of like just people being like, this is what I do. And it's like
you're promoting something.
Yeah. And we were like, we found ourselves just having conversations more about, I mean, even just like when we would like see each other in the sauna, like it was like just convos about kind of like what, like why people do what they do, especially when they're doing things that are doing visual art or music or making candles and perfume. And there was almost this, it was like, I feel like when we were growing up, I was journaling about this the other day. I feel like when we were growing up, there was like I loved music, but for so long it was like, oh, go to college, like get good grades, go to college, get a good job, make a lot of money, then retire, And then I was like, but there was always something in me that was like, something felt wrong about that, because I'm like, retire and then what,
Right.
And I loved music, but it never like matched up with my career. And then there was like a moment where my drum teacher was like, hey, if you ever wanted to do this as a career, you could. And it was like this, like, I never thought that before. And literally the rest of my life changed because of that one thing he said. I was like, oh, you can do that?
When was that for you? High school?
I was senior in high school. So it was like very last minute. I was like, I'm going to Nashville, I'm doing this.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was great. All that to say, like, people who are kind of like on those atypical paths are like people that we want to like sit down and chat with. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. And for you, we were talking, we've known each other, or at least we have known each other for 15 years.
I know.
Isn't that weird?
I was trying to tell C that earlier. I was like, oh my God.
Like 15 years.
How'd y'all meet? Through Josh?
It was just that friend group, right? That freshman year.
I mean, we both were in the business school at Belmont. So
just like going to Massey.
Really prestigious group of young
students.
Dude,
we were in the same Understanding the Bible class freshman year. Stephen Reed, right?
That's so funny.
Yes.
Because I like piped off with him.
Oh, you did? In class?
Yeah, because he said something that like disrupted my upbringing in church or something. And I was like, he said something along the lines of like, it's not the audible, like the Bible is not the audible word of God. But he didn't even say it was inspired by. It was just, I was like, but it is inspired by, right? Or something.
Yeah. You were like, oh, I'm in. Yeah. It's like 8 a.m. on a Monday. Yeah. Everybody else in the class is asleep.
Yeah, and mad at the baseball team.
You're like,
just like, all right. Yeah. One source of power. That's funny.
Yeah, I feel like y'all knew each other during your baseball days.
Yeah.
That would have been, gosh, 15 years. That's crazy.
And we did like
2009.
We were in like all the group projects together.
Yeah.
All the things. And like definitely it was me, you, and like Josh.
Another baseball dude.
And Chase.
Yeah.
It was like baseball crew and me.
Me and Josh really relied on Jordan and Chase because they were like the admin, like smart ones.
But hey, we still rely on Jordan for all that stuff.
Here's what I would say. You guys thought that you were going to be able to rely on me, but I was like 1 foot out of college, like the last 2 years of college. So I definitely remember some like projects with y'all where like I was like meeting with you and you're like, so what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't really know.
Seems good.
Jordan got really good at delegating really early.
I definitely remember you carrying some things. So anyways.
You carried your weight.
Josh didn't do anything. We'll just say that. I don't know if the podcast started, but Josh didn't do anything.
Yeah, calling out Josh.
But
then you like I feel like we didn't know each other until like you were a baseball guy at Belmont for a long time. That's when y'all knew each other, and I feel like we met because I wasn't in that world at all. I was like way on the other end in like the music world, playing cajon on the quad.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's when we met. Is like you made this transition from kind of like the baseball athlete world to the music world. But I don't know what did that transition look like for you? Like why did that happen?
Yeah, so at Belmont, but shout out to the Bruins, free Bruins here. Very, very proud.
Yes,
Bob Fisher.
Belmont till I die.
Yeah, it's funny. I was known as like this Belmont sweatpants dude. You know, most of every school day, just kind of a typical jock, and that was kind of the narrative. And then, so I coming to Belmont, I was originally recruited to play basketball.
No way.
So
What? I didn't know that.
that's a kind of something funny. I was,
Man, some people get all the talent.
well, that's not a strike at my ego. Although
No, it's a strike
I
at
was
my ego.
super good at basketball. Just kidding. But my sights were set on Belmont because I grew up in Cookeville, and I really wanted to study music. And they had this like basketball program that was just really great. And I kind of got recruited a little bit by Coach Bird. Came to a couple games. Ended up getting like offered to like walk on as a basketball player, and I just like I kind of couldn't. My family, couldn't afford Belmont. Next summer, the baseball coach came to a game, offered me a scholarship, and it was like I want to play baseball now,
That is so
and
wild.
which was really fun. And I guess the reason why that matters is because freshman year of high school for me, with my musical journey, I got a really bad stress fracture in my back. It caused like essentially a whole summer of just walking. They told me I would never be able to swing a baseball bat again, never be able to play basketball, that type of stuff. So when I was, I guess I was like 14, I was just devastated. It's like
Yeah.
my world had ended at that point. I wanted
Like
to
athletics was
Everything
kind of your
you
life
knew.
until
oh, yeah,
then.
I want to be the next Tim Tebow, like change the world through sports and
Yes.
God and all this stuff. And it was in that moment when the doctor said like you'll never do a squat again, because my back was in such shambles. My uncle at the time, he kind of very stern, direct, sweet, also just like, hey, you have no excuse, now you have to learn how to play guitar. Because up to that point I was just all basketball and baseball for me. So always the excuse, my uncle, he was the head pastor of our church and like the worship leader and yada, yada, yada. It was always like, well, I don't have time because of sports. And he was like, oh, you don't have that excuse anymore. So all that to say, moving forward to Belmont was, I learned how to play guitar, like started like the youth band and all this stuff, and just really fell in love with music. And it kind of became this thing where it was like, on Wednesday nights in the youth group, I was like the worship leader and like wanted to not really even being able to play guitar and sing at the same time. Like I was terrible. But since it was my uncle's
That's youth group,
church,
man. That's
I
where
was
we all
like,
started.
Anyone who has a guitar at youth group, it's like, you got it.
You got it. Oh,
You're
throw them on
crushing.
stage. Throw them on stage.
my
Oh, you
uncle-
play an instrument? There you go.
my uncle saw Lane too. I was like, he's like, I was like head of FCA or whatever
Yep.
Yeah.
at the high school, and he was like, we'll probably get more kids to come, to get promoted to FCA
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was terrible, but it was such a way to cultivate whatever small gift that I had and I guess my heart towards like music and all this stuff. And so when I started that journey, it really changed my life because it was like I was devastated. I had this stress fracture in my back. Thought everything was kind of, at that 14-year-old Judah time, I was like, everything's done,
Yeah.
just completely distraught. And it was really a time of just like, I was pointed to something that I didn't know that I loved. And that was music. And so I immediately started writing then, even though I only knew like G and C on the guitar, which
That's all you need.
that's all you need.
It's all you
to
need.
be a good worship leader, at that time. And so anyways, going to Belmont and studying music business. So I studied music business and
Me too. Let's go. Yep.
and you have as you have all this access to like these amazing studios that Belmont has access to. It's one of the perks of, the tuition at the time. And so I get back home. I think it was after my freshman year, and my mom looks at me and she goes, "Why aren't you like utilizing this major? You're going to Belmont. You wanted to go to Belmont. Like you're writing these songs. Like what are you doing?" And I had this vulnerable moment with my mom where I was just like, I don't feel like I'm good enough. Like if you go to Belmont for that first year, you're like,
Surrounded by musicians who are
there's
better
no
than
way.
yeah.
And there was some logic in there too for me because I was a sports guy. So it's like,
Yeah.
if you can hit, you can hit.
Yeah.
If you can't, then logically you're like, well, you're probably not going to make it to the next level, or you're not going to be at,
Yeah.
And so it wasn't even like as like self-deprecating as it sounds. It was just more like I think I'm gonna be a writer. And she was like, well, why don't you just record the songs? And so that sophomore year, I started kind of like looking for like a band that was like rock band, whatever. And it was just kind of for me, it was weird. I'm sure you guys have stories about like this in your own story. But for me, it was just like I was just missing. It was missing something.
Yeah.
And finally, junior year, I had called Nate, and because Nate, who's the banjo player in Junior Line, he was this character on campus. I don't know if y'all remember him.
I knew him well. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't.
Yeah.
But I thought he was homeless, like because he at the time when beards weren't like trendy.
Yeah, he had a big old beard.
He just didn't care.
Yeah,
the long beard.
He had like more tattoos than anybody else on campus.
Yeah,
like
the tattoos and like it was like he. But he
Nose ring, I think,
everybody
like,
was he was so sweet and endearing, and so my roommate at the time, Nick, had Nate's number. So I just texted Nate. Whatever. This is like kind of a long story, but I met him. We went and jammed in the bell tower. And then
jammed in the bell tower. Nothing more Belmont than that.
Very classic, like the cajon.
Yep, on the quad. Yep.
And I called my mom after that, and I said, I can finally tell you, like I was like crying. I was like, I feel like I found my whatever was needing to feel before we recorded music. So that was the transition for me. Was just like I was really kind of first off like self-deprecating and kind of trying to figure out if I actually had what it took. Still really didn't have that belief in myself at that point, and was just recording songs kind of just to shut my mom up.
Yeah.
Because you're at Belmont, might as well do it. And then after recording those songs was also the time of I was at Belmont, the baseball team, like you're kind of getting recruited unless you're just a stud, which we've had a few studs, but let's see if this sound.
Great.
It's okay. You get recruited at showcases and all this stuff, or like when you're playing the Vandies of the world or UT or whatever. But a lot of the recruiting goes into summer baseball. So I started getting letters from these professional teams about me going to certain summer camps and playing baseball, and which was awesome. It was so fun to kind of get at least a little bit of like flirtatious movement from the next level. And it was like a no doubt. It's like, I'm not playing summer baseball. I want to work on whatever this music is.
That's so cool too, because I think there's something where I think as we start having more of these conversations, when there is this self-doubt piece where like you had a passion for this thing, but there was a self-doubt piece where it was almost like secondary to like, oh yeah, I have a passion for music, or for me it was music too, but it was like, it was never like, oh, that's gonna be the move.
Right.
It's like, no, I'll get a normal job or I'll do, whatever. There was like something else that made more sense.
Oh yeah.
But like, there was like something about that, but it's so cool that you literally had your mom and your uncle both, like you were almost in denial about it. And your mom and your uncle came in and you were like, no, like you have something here.
Yeah.
Like, and I think it is cool. I think there's a moment where there's like, we almost can't do it on our own. Like we need somebody around us. We just honestly don't have, most people don't have the confidence to do that on their own. And they need somebody to like push themselves into doing that.
Yeah. I was taught then like encouragement, obviously this is going to kind of come across as like a sermon, but it's like a little like mini thing of like, when you're encouraging someone, or at that point in my life where, you're doing like this special song at church, or, you're doing the talent show or the showcases at Belmont or whatever it may be. Like when you encourage someone, you're like, I equate it to like, you're putting courage inside of someone. So in courage, you're putting courage.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt like I didn't have, and that for anybody that's kind of on this journey to do whatever field it may be outside of music, it's like the first thing that it takes is courage. And sometimes it comes from, you're kind of standing on the shoulders of somebody else.
Yeah. That's so interesting because Steve, when he started Ranger Station, everyone in Nashville was like, Steve's got this cool candle. He's made one candle and people are like, it's amazing.
Right. It was probably super average.
People
like,
were
yeah.
almost too encouraging, maybe.
Yeah.
But he had other friends who didn't live here who were like, well, what's your real job? So he had this outside, perspective.
I had that in music too.
Yeah.
When I was in music, it was like, what's your real job? I'm like, this. And then I was like, one day I was like, I'm going to switch from music to fragrance. And people are like, but what's your real job? And I was like, I guess this.
I don't know. I'm not making any money.
But did you have, I think the thing that changed it for me, because I'm from Minnesota, so I would go home to Minnesota and it's like, and nothing against where I grew up. Like I love where I grew up, but it was definitely like a much more traditional.
And your friends there are like the most supportive.
Oh, they're like the most supportive. But they were also the ones that were like, oh, I don't really get it. What is your real job? I'm like, no, this is my real job. Yeah. But I don't know. Did you have an experience where like I felt like I found in Nashville like it doing music or doing fragrance or whatever it was didn't feel as crazy because I was surrounded by a community of people that were just. They're like, oh yeah, I'll take the risk and see what happens.
Oh yeah.
Did you feel that way like in Nashville, or did you have that crew around you?
I feel like that in Nashville, that is it's kind of this like fun subset, like friend groups. Even like even all of our stories collectively, it's really fun to have to be able to talk about because it's like I feel like doing something like Ranger Station and. I know you were with Abel for a while and like kind of creating these things that are very specific, but not normal. And bands in Nashville are normal, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's like everybody's the lead singer of some band. And
that's why Belmont was so intimidating.
Oh yeah. And everybody can sing. And Dave Barnes actually had this quote back in the day that I love. He said, you can either allow this community to intimidate you or to inspire you. Mm. And so I think like what you're saying, it's like you allowed the community to inspire you to do something different. And we had this like punk song. We never released it, but it was called Friends, Uncles at Weddings. And it was literally like an FU to those friends, uncles at weddings that were being like, you're in a band?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, so you're irresponsible?
Yeah. And so there comes with that territory of that tension of being able to be like, I have a passion for candles and fragrance and I'm going to do something with it. Yeah. I'm also in a band or, I'm also playing drums,
Yes.
Okay. But you're in a band and you have Judah and the Lion and then you have Judah, but I think your approach to your music is different than anyone that I've ever seen. Like at going to your shows, it's like you could not know one song of yours and you would leave being like, that was the most fun I've ever had. Like, I think you have this like unapologetic air to your, like, to what you do. And it's really inspiring. And, I was wondering, like, is that something that you've always had? Like when you approached your music, were you just like, I'm going to do this and see what happens? Or was there like a moment in time where you're like, okay, like I actually just don't care. Let's go for it. Like, did something change for you?
So when we started out, that was very kind. Thank you.
I wouldn't just BS you.
I know she doesn't do that. Yeah. We know that.
I feel like it was always kind of that spirit, at least, was always kind of there because when I coming into Belmont, I just was going to be like a worship leader at a church or songwrite and do these things. And that's also a beautiful thing to do. But, it became very evident that the boys, when I met the boys, we had come out with this EP before the Christian Showcase.
Oh, yeah.
And after the Christian Showcase and we won the talent show or whatever at Belmont, and then we were going to the best of the best, the boys looked at me and go, we want you to write like secular music. And I was like, well, you don't write the songs. I'm doing that. Yeah. And just the way that I was brought up and like the way that I viewed music at the time was just very like, you honored God and did all this stuff. And I was having a hard time finding that at the time in secular music. And I had this moment just in my own faith where it was just like, no, I want you to you can honor me through telling your story, essentially. And so I feel like even from the start of my journey with music and the boys and even some of the other projects that I've been a part of, it became very evident really quick that it had to be authentic. And that came from, not from necessarily like I don't care what people think or the spirit of being unapologetic. I think I've kind of come into that because I'm such a people pleaser. Like I love, or I should say, I have loved for people to like me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Who doesn't? But yeah.
Yeah. And at the heart of that, it's probably a good thing to
Right.
want to be kind and do all this stuff. But I think I was doing it out of this place of like not being loving because I wanted to love someone. It was like I wanted to love someone because I wanted to be their hero.
Right.
Or this thing of this scenario where like the ego starts to kind of push these things. And so I had this moment with it was on a tour. It was with John Foreman, and shout out to John Foreman.
Steve's hero.
Oh yeah, big shout out to John.
Everybody's
Yeah.
hero.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's hero. The reason we all do music.
And he looked at me after we had our first successful song, and he looked at me and I was like, "How do you do this for so long and do it so well?" If you meet John, he's the best person.
I met him
all
once
the
at
boys.
Cafe Coco, and it was the highlight of my life. So
Yeah, he's the best. And he said, you know, when you're leaving your family and when you're doing all this stuff, every word that you write needs to count. Because it's not just about, you know, money comes and goes and blah, yada, yada, yada. But like when you're out there, you need to have to say something because that's what people leave with. And I feel like our band, you know, we went through this kind of struggle of identity where we were kind of coming up when Lumineers and Mumford and all these bands were kind of having this hot moment, and even getting compared to those bands kind of pissed me off. You know, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, we're not like them. I'm a Southern boy. I'm from Cookeville,
Yeah.
Tennessee, you know?
yeah,
And so I feel like we were kind of stubborn with the sound. Like we went from kind of a folky thing to like having like some hip hop and some rock influences, which is way more the three of us than the folk was.
Right.
And so to go about your question was like, I think we've always kind of had that stubborn spirit of just like wanting to be our own band, and like me as an artist, like wanting to say something. But after that record and just going through a lot while the band was kind of having this moment of, the uncles weren't the friends at uncles, you know, weren't asking any longer,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
Right.
how this was like the only job. It was like, oh, we're having this moment and it's beautiful, but my family's falling apart at home. And it really was hard because on the outside, from everybody's perspective, it was like, how are you not the happiest person alive? Like you just had a few hits on alternative radio and
Yeah.
you're getting to live the dream. And that's true. But also like back home, like my mom was in and out of jail. My dad was going through like a midlife crisis, and that was like hard because it's like you're 25 years old and you're like,
you still don't even fully know who you are.
oh
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Not that we ever figured
and then
out,
I'm
but-
coping in all the wrong ways as well, and like making bad decisions. And we were out 250 shows a year, and it was like one of those moments where it was like, I have to say something. You know, intertwine that with little John Foreman wisdom. It's just like, this doesn't mean anything. And I finally brought the boys in. It was like, hey, like we have to look at this like at the end of it kind of sounds morbid, but like, who do we want to say we are at the end of our career?
Yes.
Do we want to be the biggest? Do we want to try to be the biggest band in the world, like the most fame or whatever it may be? And I'm not saying any of that's negative. And of course, like we want to become the most successful version of ourselves. I don't think that that's wrong, but at the core of our why, it's like, what is our why? Like, why are we doing this? It's to hopefully help people feel less alone. At the drop of, if I could say one thing about my music, it's like I just want people to feel less alone. Because people like John Foreman, my favorite band of all time, Frightened Rabbit, like the one writer that I go back to, he had a very tortured life, Scott Hutchison. he helped me through so many situations
Yeah.
that he'll never know. This songwriter out of Glasgow, out of Scotland. And I was like, I would rather mean a lot to less people than mean little to a lot of people.
Totally.
And that was kind of the marker there. Like, it was like around 2016, 17, where it was like...
I think there's a big, you touched on something where there's like, when we get to the end of our lives.
Okay.
I kind of like it.
To grab.
You're good.
Okay.
Adds to the character.
All right.
You touched on something so real. I think for anybody that's like, oh, I'm just gonna kind of like blaze my own trail here. Well, first of all, there's like this something about it that's like, man, like there's something, even if you don't know it at first, there's something in you that's like, there's something that I need to say, or there's something in me that needs to come out. Similar to what John was saying, where it's like make it count. And I think there's a shift where, like you said, we need to strive to be the best versions of ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with that, like not at all. But you also like touched on something with, it's like once we get to the end of our lives, like I think there's you have to redefine what success looks like, and I feel like as we're raised with this idea of like, oh, this is what success looks like, work hard, make a lot of money, and retire early, it's like, so was that like, what was that? Was that something that like you knew was happening like in you, or was that just, did a switch flip one day, or was that kind of a gradual thing where, you got to that point of like, oh no, like what do I want my life to look like?
Yeah.
At the end of it,
Totally.
When I look back on it, what do I want to, be able to say about it?
I think that comes with maybe two answers. Like, one, from the band's sake, it was our first shot at like something just major was the David Letterman show. And it was right out of college. Like, the boys had just dropped out.
Went pro.
I vividly remember this.
They went pro.
They went pro.
Yeah, they didn't drop out. They went pro.
Yeah, the boys, exactly. But we, at the time I was working like 4 jobs as well as being in the band. And because we were essentially living out of a van. Me and Brian, my bandmate, we lived in the same room for 3 years in the same bed.
No way. That's real. That's marriage.
You've done
This
this.
is my nightmare.
You've done this before. Where
Being in a
you're
band
like,
is a marriage. There you go.
Besides being married. I like being married, but like
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's
sleeping in the same bed with a bandmate.
Some bands I maybe like to do this. I guess they're married or whatever, but I didn't want to kiss Brian. So
yeah. Right. Yeah.
it's
That's
a
fair.
little different, but
A little different. Yeah.
we were doing this stuff, and then we get this chance to be on the David Letterman show, and it was totally random how we got the gig. Like, somebody on his staff that was picking the music randomly liked our record Kids These Days, which we dropped right after we dropped out and went on tour, and it was just such an iconic thing. Like, we have so many funny stories just from that singular event. Like, his crew like made fun of us while we're sound checking, and like when we get down to play from the green room, the green room was like 70 degrees, like normal temperature or whatever. You get down to the studio, it's 45, and we were so dumb. We kept our musicians up, or our instruments up in the studio, and when we came down, they were all out of tune.
Oh, yep.
And you got like 3 minutes to get ready, and he's like, I'm like frantically like tuning,
Trying to
he's
tune.
like freaking out, And anyways, we ended up playing the song like 30 seconds faster. We weren't playing a click. So I'm so nervous, and I start out the song. It's like,
Yeah, you're like going for it.
yeah.
That adrenaline's running, so that tempo's going through the roof. Yeah.
And looking back, it was fine. But the next day, so we shot the day before. We come back to Knoxville. I watched it with my brother and my family. And at the time, I think we gained like 3 Facebook followers.
You were like, this is going to be huge.
This was gonna be the big break,
Like,
right?
we're a band. Yeah, I was like, finally, we're a fucking band. Like, this is sick. And it was. And we still have that to talk about, and it's beautiful. Like, he was right before he announced his retirement, so we were like, I can't believe we got the opportunity to be on that show or whatever. But we did have a moment, like the 3 of us again, where we were just kind of like doing that personal inventory of being like, okay, if we were starting to play fun shows opening for Ben Rector and Matt Carney and all this stuff, and we're playing rooms, and seeing the Lions out the door, and we're like, I'm an athlete, right? So I'm like, we make goals. And I'm like, we're gonna play Red Rocks by
Right.
2017 or
KPIs.
whatever. Yeah.
We've got them. Yeah.
And it became very apparent that, and even being at these festivals where some of these older bands are just miserable, and you get to that why of like, what is success and what is the reality of this career. And that goes with anything.
Yeah.
If you're doing a startup and it's all about money, well, good luck, because you're going to be severely depressed when that check doesn't come in, or whatever, or when it does come in and you're just,
it doesn't do it. Yeah.
and so we said like, hey, this has to be about people. Like it can't be about our ego or playing Red Rocks. And again, not that is the evil. Playing Red Rocks is sick.
Yeah.
Like doing Madison Square Garden would be awesome.
Yeah.
Like all that stuff, that's not an evil thing.
You can have those goals, right?
Yeah, and that, I think that's great. Like
Yeah.
ambition, all this stuff, probably going on a tangent here, but I think the success of our band, or what like I want to do with my life, even outside of music, is like look people in the face and like hopefully help them feel like we had a couple of weeks after the David Letterman show, we had this show, and it was like in Indianapolis, I think, and like 50 people showed up. And honestly, I was kind of pissed. Yeah. I was like, this sucks. Like we're out here losing money, and this guy comes backstage, and I had like one of the best moments of my career. He was like, we found the song randomly, and we just sang this around my brother when he died.
Oh.
And you're like, okay, I don't care how many people are here.
Yeah.
Like this is what I would give my life to. It's because that way it doesn't matter about like the success of songs or whatever. It's like, okay, this dude just went through something so hard, and somehow this song reached his brother in a way that like affected him. He wanted to like go out of this world with this song. And so little moments like that are just like so imperative, and also putting courage inside of you, because you're like, okay, I want to have hit songs, to hopefully have more moments like this.
Yeah.
But it's not more moments like Red Rocks or whatever. It's more moments so maybe I can be used in a way that's like helping someone in a hard time or whatever.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Sorry,
I think it's it's so
Me
true.
too.
I think it's like there's when you're on a path like that too, and I think the Lord works in cool ways where it's it's so easy to think of like, oh, I want to do this, so that's really big and everybody knows about like the band or the company or whatever it is that you're doing, and then it's like, and then he just like every once in a while just like gives you a little elbow with like something like that of like, this is what matters.
Yeah. And
this
that
one
was
dude.
like for me at the time, it was like all pride, right? It was like, I was pissed at a show. It was like, it was a venue that was maybe 200 people, like max, but we only sold 50 tickets. And it was that whole like get out of your own way moment. Or it was like, just like, like the quotes we all know, like let it happen, trust in the process, do the thing that fulfills you, and that, hopefully at the core of it, it's just love,
Yeah. We, something that we, I mean, Jordan and I just say personally, and also like has become like something at Ranger Station, is this idea of, we want to die with memories, but not dreams. And like, it's like those, I think it's so crazy to, when you think about ambition or like working hard or like what, where do I want my life to go? It's like, I want to achieve this, and I want to do this, and I want to like, it's all these like really big things. But then when you like, I feel like looking back on the things that you really remember, it's like those little moments, it's totally not like, yes, you remember Red Rocks. Yes, you remember, you remember like, you remember those, but it's like those, it's wild how vivid like those little moments with like those one or two people where it's like what you were doing impacted them in a like really real way.
Yeah.
Become like the really strong memories. So
that is it.
Yeah.
It's like those what's the, I always come back to the, what is his name? Robin Williams. In the
Dead Poets.
Therapist movie.
Oh, Good Will Hunting.
Good Will
Yes.
Hunting.
Yes.
Where he's like, it's the idiosyncrasies. I was like, that's so true.
Yeah.
So
You know,
true.
it's like those little moments of like, okay, I'm here, you know.
Yeah. Oh man.
So
I love that.
You create, like, it is so wild to step back and think, like, we know you just as Judah Akers, but like your music and your art touches people in these like crazy ways, like what you just said. So you're a part of these people's memories. Like what memories are you trying, like what are you chasing right now? Like what are you excited about? What are you going after for this year?
That's a great question. So we just finished like our record, and like literally kind of the start of the new year has finished it up. Of course, it's not coming out for a bit, but I thought a lot about just like that personal narrative. So my life, just growing up, I think I was thinking about this kind of before talking to you guys, and I was like, I don't really know what I have to offer in this, but I was like, I feel like what's important, and you guys define this so clearly too in your own lives, is like the narrative that people speak over you isn't true.
Yeah.
Like you get to define that, or for me, it's like God. For other people that don't believe in God, like it's finding it through the lens of love. And so, you know, I've never felt like I've been Judah the baseball player, or Judah the basketball player before that, or Judah the dancer, or whatever it was in high school, and then Judah the singer of this band, or Judah, you know, all this stuff. Like, and so I'm trying to push myself to actually do something different. So during the pandemic, I got really into painting, which is super fun. And I don't really feel adequate at it, but it was just one of those things where it was just like, it helped me kind of process what I was going through at the time. And then getting to do that with my fiance, was amazing.
They're amazing paintings. I forgot that you guys did that. And when we walked into the house, I'm like, oh my gosh.
So amazing to have too, when you have something really creative that you can like, it's so easy to invest like so much of who you are and your personality into like what you do if it's creative, to have this other creative thing that's like,
yes.
I'm just going to do this just because I'm going to do it. Like I don't have to, it doesn't have to sell any tickets. It doesn't have to do anything. Like it's just
exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. And
There's no success here. It's just you doing it.
there's no like
doing it.
angle, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to like do this thing where it's gonna, you know, whatever, but like I'm doing this because I love it. And you know, for that at the time, I was going through this really painful divorce, and I was writing these angry songs, and my therapist kind of prescribed like, hey, could you do something else artistic outside of writing these angry songs? And so painting was kind of my prescription for that really helped. But this year I'm kind of pushing myself to do something different. I don't know what that is yet.
I just started making sourdough.
You got
Jordan is knitting and making salad.
Do you have the mama?
And she is
Don't say I'm
thriving.
knitting.
You are. Own that, babe. Be unapologetic.
Own
about
that
Come on.
I'm not.
So do you have the mother?
Yeah, I
Oh,
can
yeah.
give you some. I'm telling you.
Could be your
We
thing.
thought about doing that.
Okay,
It's honestly amazing. You need it.
this sounds crazy, but like
It's the
there's
greatest thing
something
Jordan's ever done.
I feel like we've had a crazy few years too. Just, I mean, lots of things happening, and this past year was really crazy for me personally. And I just had this like longing to do things with my hands. And I was like, I don't even know. Like, Steve's like, what do you mean do things with your hands? I'm like, I need to like make something for the satisfaction of like,
For no reason.
yeah,
I'm making
no
it.
one except for me just doing this. But it's so cool because I'm doing it and then other people get to enjoy it. Just like your art. It's like I am looking at one of your paintings right now, yours and Cena's, and it's beautiful. But like with sourdough, we get to have our family at the dinner table, and like people are like, this is incredible. I'm like, thank you so much.
I created this.
But it's like my therapy.
Tears.
Like
Totally.
it's the
No.
best. I think there's something to that of just like
100%
making
there is.
things for no reason.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's so important to have like, and truly, I think that the reason it's so important is because I think it reminds us, you know, for you it's music, for me it's, you know, fragrance now used to be music. You know, it's like it reminds us of why we started doing those things in the first place.
Absolutely.
Where you're like, it's so easy to get wrapped up in like, oh, we got to do this. We have to hit this deadline. We got to get this record out. We got to do, you know,
Right.
we got to write this many songs, these many fragrances, like all that. And then you do something like that. That's like, its sole purpose is literally just in the doing of it. And you're like, oh, this is like, when I started pouring candles, it's like, that's all it was.
Right.
When you started, you know, playing guitar, it was like, that's what it was. It's
The
just,
GNC.
yeah. The GNC, that's all you needed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that you'll probably feel that in other avenues of your life, to where it's like, okay, I get to start something. I don't know if you knew a whole lot about like making your own sourdough before, but
Nothing. Knew nothing.
Literally
Okay.
nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
Still
Started
nothing.
from the ground.
Yeah.
So- Yep.
I started these paintings before this newest record, and I promise you it changed the course of the record, because I came back to songwriting, and it was from this place of like forgiveness and acceptance and kind
Yes.
of this. I had less anger because I was able to get it out. You know, I'd put my hip hop on and just fucking go out these
Yeah.
canvases, and it taught me a little bit about the process. Just like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing
Yeah.
with this paint. I mean, we had paint everywhere at the house too. Like, it was terrible. Like, didn't think it through at all. But it was just I feel like for anyone, like the term creative, I think is oversaid, because we're all creatives.
Right.
Every human is meant to create. I don't care. Like my brother, the accountant, he's meant to create.
Yeah.
We're meant to do something with our brains and to create that. And that could mean like create love in a house.
Right.
That could mean create like joy and dance and be goofy or whatever it may be. Like I feel like the term creatives has gotten very oversaturated, and it kind of pisses me off at this point, because we are all meant to create. Everybody in here is creative. But it's like, once you go through something that you don't know what you're doing, and you're able to kind of mess up so many times. Like we'd paint something and I'd be like, this sucks.
Yeah, we gotta.
Well, guess what?
Tweak
It
it.
dries up and you go paint over it.
Right.
You know, and that taught me so much with making records.
Yeah.
Guess what? We get to make this into what we want, and we'll cover it up, and we'll put plaster over it or whatever. We'll clean it up, and then we move on. We move forward.
Yes.
And so I feel like with sourdough, I don't know if you can really do that with
Yeah.
mother and stuff, but
You have to keep it alive, but like it's a process. I feel like I have
If
a
you mess
little-
up one batch, you just start over with the next
Yeah,
one.
it is like it's the same thing, and it's been like a really beautiful thing for me too. Like each one, you know, I make it for a group of people. Whenever I make it for people, of course, it's like, oh, that looks weird, but it tastes great, and it
Totally.
like nourishes people, and people are so grateful for it, no matter what it looks like. And I'm like coming in and I'm like, okay, I just made this and it's not that pretty, and people are like, oh my gosh,
This
shut
is
up.
the-
This
the
is
best
so
thing.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like these paintings, I'm like, I would never know you messed them up. Like they're incredible. And I think that is life. Like you don't really just have a clean slate. Like you just have to paint over it and keep going and figure out like your next move. And so
It's the
anyways,
process of doing that where you're like, and I think that's why it gets back to the heart of like why we do the main things that we do. It's like, in the reminder of that, it's like the satisfaction, the joy comes out of like, yeah, you had to paint over that, but you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't done it in the first place.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
The
And it's
mistakes
like,
that you made on the previous thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Totally.
and I always have this idea of like, and I had somebody when I was transitioning from music into starting a company, like I had somebody sit me down and be like, hey, what is the worst case scenario? You know, and I was And I was like, it doesn't work. We've spent all this money, blah, blah, blah. It fails. It goes
You
out
were
of
like
business. Stuff.
spiraling in
I
your
was
mind.
spiraling.
He
Bad.
needed someone to be
I was
like,
bad. I
what?
was like, this is never going to work. Yeah, going back to encouragement. I needed encouragement installed in me.
Yeah.
And it kind of led me to this moment of, that conversation became like, hey, yeah, if that happens, so what? It's not that big of a deal. Like,
Right.
that is not that bad of a situation. And it led me to this place of like, the worst case scenario became not doing it because I was scared.
Totally.
You know, doing it and failing is fine. Painting that thing and being like, well, that's bad. I got to paint over it and figure something else out. Like, that's good. That's like, yes,
Right.
you could consider it a failure, or you could consider it like, oh, well, that didn't work. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's so important to just like get back to the heart of like, it's about the process of doing it. And I'm like such a nerd, but I'm reading a Theodore Roosevelt book right now. And his whole thing is all about like the man in the arena doing, like, the critics don't get the credit. The people in the arena doing the work, whether you're successful with it or not.
Oh, right.
Like, the success becomes in the actual act of doing it.
something.
Yeah, doing something, whether that's with your hand or your mind or whatever it is.
And I feel like too, and you guys can spin off this thought, but at least in my life, there are definitely two buckets, and then you can add to one, and I've definitely added to the wrong one so many times. You know, some people call it like the left shoulder, right shoulder, angel demon thing, but I think I would call it more like love and fear. And it's like, if you're pouring into that love bucket, this love thing, then you're able to create something beautiful. Because you're able to say like, oh, this is sourdough. This is, I don't know how much good this is going to do for me.
Right.
But but if that's fear, it's like, I might mess this up, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But love says like, oh, I get to feed my family with this.
Yeah.
And I get to feed my friends. And this is fun.
Yeah.
You know, the love would say like, oh, like, I really did not want to write about my divorce. I was like, I don't want to do this the wrong way. I don't want to highlight things that are wrong. I don't want to make myself look good and my ex look bad, or vice versa. And then love would say like, this probably will help people.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, this might do something good for someone that's going through something similar that I've been to. So, and not to quote Kanye, but Kanye has this quote.
But to quote Kanye, yeah.
Love that we're taking it here.
You might not want to use this in the podcast.
Cut this part out.
I don't know how canceled he'll be when this podcast comes out, but he had said something like some interview or something that I'm pretty sure it was Kanye, but he said, people that are liked are trapped. And that was when I started to think like people that do something that is wild, and I'm not promoting Kanye's like dialogue for personal like whatever, but I do think that it's very noticed when people are operating, and I've seen this in my life too, in my writing and other parts of my life, where when people are operating out of, wow, I am loved and fully like known and understood, I can make this movement because of this encouragement, because of this light that's kind of that I'm accessing. Or you can see it in my life, at least, where I was operating from this form of fear and like, what's the worst thing that could happen? What I don't know how to trust after this situation. I don't know how to make another. I mean, I wanted to quit music during the pandemic. During my divorce, I was like about to call my manager, like, I'm just kind of done. I don't see the fruit of this. I feel like I'm adding to the noise, the clutter, all this stuff that was kind of happening, you know, and I would easily, I can go looking back at pictures and be like, I was operating out of this bucket of complete fear.
Yeah.
And I feel like for any person, it's like, whatever you're doing, you have to, you know, the phrase is coined by Peter Crone, who I love, but it's like, what would love do? And that I feel like for any human being is like, okay, in this situation, when you're starting your sense, when you're doing anything new, like knitting or whatever, it's like, well, what would love do? You know, but I know it sounds like maybe a dad thing to say, but it's like, no, truly, what would love say?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
would be like, I think you should fucking do it. You know, that's what I think it would say. So that's maybe a little bit of tangent, but I think whenever you're coming into that spot of doing something new and fun, it also is just like downloading love inside of your heart, because that's the way I felt after like doing those paintings, that I didn't know what I was doing at all when I started.
Yeah, man. Well, that's evident in everything you do. I mean, truly, we've known each other for a long time, as we said, and your music, your art, your friendships, like even just, you know, when we run past you, we're like, hey. You can tell that you're looking at your life through a lens of love, and you're like thinking about people, and it's really beautiful, and we're grateful for that.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's so true. Like you can definitely see that for sure.
I feel that from you guys as well.
Well, thank you. Man, I think there's something, like, again, kind of the whole idea of these conversations is around this, why do we do what we do? And you touched on it so well already, but like I would almost be remiss if I like didn't ask, like, what's, you know, all this comes down to like us getting to the end of our lives, and it's like looking back and being like, you know, I did pretty good. You know, I'm proud of that. Like, what does legacy mean to you? You know, however much time like you get here, what, like, when you're at the end of that and you're looking back, you know, what does having a good legacy look like for you?
Something I think about often, and thank you guys. That's so sweet. Both of what y'all said. I don't want to go that unnoticed. I feel the same esteem for y'all. Every time that I saw you guys during what I was going through, it was just met with pure love, reciprocated, like non-judgment, and love for what I was going through, and love for my ex's story as well. Mm-hmm. It was always just met with like an empathy in every way. I feel like, you know, if in my end, I feel like I would want the underlying current to be love. Like, what was my why was like that I felt love. You know, the Maya Angelou quotes, like, people might not remember what you said, what you did, blah, blah, but they'll remember the way that they felt around you. Yeah. And I feel like I would hope that people felt joy, love, you know, good things. I feel like also I would love for people to think that I depleted perfection in them, and that I was able to see the gold, versus seeing the negative parts of themselves, and was able to kind of encourage and bring bits of that out, whether it be through music or art or whatever I may do in my next, you know, chapter outside of, you know, music. And yeah, I feel like, and you guys embody this so well as well. Not that I'm trying to toot your own horn. I also wouldn't say something like bullshit either.
This is honest.
But I think I've what we can control is what we can control.
Yeah.
And I'm very much not perfect, but if at the end of my days, my eventual kids, my wife, my family, the people that knew me close, like you guys, and then outside of that, I would love for me to be able to just tell them I love them, you know?
Yeah.
At its simplest form, not like in a big way, but like in a,
yes,
like, hey, I'll give you a hug if you need it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. That's so
That's
cool.
so important.
It's like using the like moments that you have in life, like it's going deep and going like, I think it's a hard conversation kind of, but it's like, you never know when the last time you're going to be with someone is, or like what someone's going through or whatever. And like each moment you have with people, it's sacred. Like life is sacred, and it is a gift. and using it to fulfill your purpose and to like give people love is like the greatest thing you can give. It's the greatest thing you can do. I feel like I've been learning that. I've been like, life is so hard. What are we doing?
Right,
you know?
right.
And then I think I've been learning like, no. Like, yes, it's really hard, and it's actually just gonna probably get a little bit harder as we go, as we get older, and we like lose people around us, and you know, marriages fall apart, and people don't act how you think they're going to, and all those things. Like, that's hard. And it like really sucks.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're like, hold on. Life is a gift. We were each created with a distinctive purpose. What is that purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is sacred. That is something no one else can give to the people around you. And so I love that perspective. I like love leaning into that. Like,
Well, it's like what John
life.
Foreman said to you about your music. It's like, that's like,
It has
let's
to
just
matter.
copy and paste that into like literally every single interaction we have with somebody. It's like, we don't know. Like, we just had this recently where it was like, man, we lost somebody that we were like, man, like it's we had this really special moment with them when
We had a brief moment. We lost my uncle in December, but we saw him in November for 15 minutes.
Yeah. And it was like one of those things
it
where
was beautiful. Like,
Jordan had bronchitis for like 2 months. It was all this stuff, and we were like, we
Yeah,
can't.
your
like,
babies, you're miserable or
It
trapped.
and we're just like,
it was
we gotta.
literally terrible.
We
like
were
for
like,
me.
we should not make this trip to Knoxville. It makes no sense at all. And Jordan was just like, there was something like where Jordan was just like, we need to go.
Yeah.
And we went.
And
And
then
we
we
had
were
to
like,
leave early.
what
And we had
are
to
we
come
doing?
home, and it was just like, why did we go? This was terrible. It wasn't enjoyable at all. And then, but we got to see Jordan's uncle.
And-
and it was like,
He
and
died like
2
3 weeks later.
2 or 3 weeks later.
Yeah. And it really like sank in for us. Like, it really was 10 or 15 minutes, but it was really special. And he commented on our kids and was like interacting with our kids and us. And it was like this really beautiful thing. And it was a very ordinary moment. He was going to the UT Georgia game, which was a disaster.
Go Vols.
Go
Go
Big Orange.
Vols. That was a tough game.
We're back.
But like, he was just passing through, going to a game, and he used his time very intentionally, and it was like a really special moment. And so I love that. I think like all of us, or at least for me personally, like I'm trying to lean into that too, of like
yeah.
making the little things count. And
I think you guys do that well. I think those intentional spaces too, of just like not knowing what you guys are going through right now.
yeah.
Like, not in every interaction, it could count, you
Yeah.
know, and might as well make it count. Like what, not to coin John again, but
Please, we can.
John,
screw
hi.
you, John Foreman, if you're listening to this.
All of John's words have mattered, so we have a lot of his words
Screw
too.
you, John. You're everybody's hero. But no, but I think it's like, it's exactly what you said. It's like every moment, and the older you get, it's like that. There's one of my favorite scriptures is hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. And so encouragement, all these things, love. One of my least favorite scriptures was faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. That sounds like very morbid for me to say that, because I'm always just like, what about trust and truth? What about
There are other
justice?
things.
Totally, yeah.
There's so much more cool things, but like without hope, without love, all these things like justice doesn't exist. It's like love has to be the example, and hope. There's this metaphor that one of my favorite writers says, and I don't remember what his name is, meaning my favorite quote of a writer that I don't know. But he said, he does this metaphor about hope in life, and he says, if hope looks like us looking, me and you, if you're the skeptic and we'll say that you're the hope and I'm the skeptic, I would look at you and said, oh, it's so bad out there, we can't go. The storms are too bad and all this stuff, and like, it's too hard. And then you, the hope, would say, no, it's actually way worse. but we're going anyways. And I think that for all of our lives is like as a good metaphor of realizing that life is really hard. Life is probably only getting harder. There's beautiful moments intertwined. But the fact is, like, you move forward.
Yeah.
And you keep trucking along and trusting.
Yeah.
For me, it's God. For other people, it's other things. But I feel like for any human, like, that hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. It's true, because hope isn't hope when everything's good. Hope is hope when it's bad.
Yeah.
Hope is hope when you're alone in your room and you want to die.
Yeah.
And you're saying, no, I'm going to hang on to something that's bigger than me, which I think is important for all of us to remember, even when it's really fucking hard too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it gives so much value to it's like, yes, life's hard, and it's like that's what makes the hope so beautiful. And darn you, John, shadow proves the sunshine, right?
Oh my God.
Totally. No, it's
Tie it all
true.
together.
It does.
But it's so, like, as cheesy as it is, it's like so true. Like, what do we need? Like, why, we don't need the hope if the life isn't hard. So I love that point of, like, yeah, it's like, it's worse than you think, but we're going anyways.
Yeah, for me in my life, it was called out so heavily because I was this like optimistic, hopeful person, but everything was kind of good. Like, I like raised my flag to hope, and I was like, even when the band first started, I had some hard things happen in my life, but nothing like my 20-year-old version of me found out what life was, and it was just kind of like, oh, hope isn't hope necessarily until it's like gone through the fire,
Right.
a bit.
It's gotta be tested.
And I'm still terrible at it, by the way. I'm still pruning that love aspect of my life, but I think the hope aspect of any human being's experience in life is doing that thing where you're saying, like, I told my sister, because we're still kind of going through a lot with family stuff, and me and my sister would always say, like, oh, it's all good. And I was like, can we just start saying, like, it is what it is? And we're gonna be fine.
All good. Yeah.
Like, can we stop?
Let's
doing
not
this,
sugarcoat
like,
this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, let's just say,
Yes.
like, hey, this actually sucks. Like, mom's going to jail again. Like, that's really hard. And we love our mom, and she's the best. And all this stuff, but, like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And this is really hard, but you know what? We're gonna be good.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah.
be okay, and so is mom.
Right.
Yeah.
And getting to that point, and, like, with hope, then it starts to get a little bit more free in the ways that I'm going on a tangent, but it's like that. Then I'm responsible for myself.
Yeah.
And then I can surrender this thing. It's like, I can't control anybody around me but myself. And so it's my job to be a person that, at the drop of a hat, can be love to someone.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm striving for. Again, I'm not great at it, but I feel like that's that thing. I don't know remember what you said that inspired that. Just like, oh, and you were saying, life is hard, and it's gonna get harder, and, like, we have to make the most of these moments. And it's
Yeah.
true, because it's like, you don't know.
Yeah.
I think hope and joy get so misconstrued so many times too, where it's like, oh, the hopeful, joyful person is that one that's always like, it's all good. When it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, actually, before something can be good, like, you have to acknowledge what it is. Like, if you're just like, oh, it's good, and we're just gonna brush it under the rug, sugarcoat it, and it's like, you're
That was
just
me.
being dishonest to yourself. You're being dishonest to the situation.
Yeah.
And as hard as it is, it's like, exactly back to what you said of, like, hey, it's actually worse than you thought. It's almost like, oh, it's bad out there, so we're not going to go. It's like, it's all good. We're just not even going to go there. We're just going to pretend it's not a thing. But it's like, it takes a lot. It takes like it's hard to, like, open that door into, hey, this is really hard, and we need to acknowledge that.
Oh.
And then we need to, and then we just need to, like, sit there in that. Like, there's, like, that is so difficult to do. But before you can, like, experience joy out of that, or it's like, and that's what hope looks like, is like being in that and knowing that, like, it can and will get better.
It's sitting with it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
part of that. But you can't have that if you never acknowledge that, like, oh man, that's hard.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if we were supposed to end. I don't know how this is supposed to go, but I'm just
Neither do we.
I'm gonna say, but it's just like when I was in this during the pandemic and stuff, when I was going through a lot. My aunt had just died tragically. My uncle had just died in a similar way tragically.
Your uncle that encouraged you to do music?
No.
Okay.
Different uncle. It was, I don't know if I would want it to be mentioned, but it was a suicide for both my aunt and uncle. I was going through heartbreak that I wasn't prepared for. And I had this moment where I was like this hopeful kid, same Judah, I would say, but like just kind of beat down by life a little bit. But I was still kind of like raising this, like, I don't want to call it toxic positivity flag, but it was definitely like intertwined with some of, I have to be positive.
Yeah.
And I was extremely depressed, like severely. And it wasn't until my sister and my best friend Josh during that time were able to kind of like look at me in the face and like, hey, you're not doing good. And then now, like through a lot of work and therapy and a lot of kind of just challenging myself and also being like super happy again with my fiance. And I look back at those moments and it's like sitting with, I've thought about like depression or anger or what all this stuff that we all go through in life, through pain, deep pain, whether it be heartbreak, death, interpersonal stuff, whatever it may be, pain, sitting with sadness and asking it questions is so important for the human, because you're able to look at it and be like, hey, how are you doing? Because it doesn't seem like this part of you that doesn't want to wake up in the morning. Not that I was like going through my own version of like suicidal thoughts. I just was like, I had no sense of like my why or like purpose.
Foundation or yeah.
Because all this stuff was out of my control, or I felt out of my control, and it was just happening to me. It wasn't happening, it was happening to me, not with me. And once I kind of started being like, okay, how do I do this in a way that's like, this is with me right now, but it's not who I am. Like I'm with this sadness, and I think it's probably a valid sadness.
Yeah.
Like what I know bits and pieces of y'all's story, but like what we all go through is hard.
Yeah.
Everybody in here is coming in here with different scenarios of life being really hard.
Yeah.
But it's not saying like, oh, I'm like what I used to. I was like, oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's gonna be fine. We're good.
I'm good. Yeah.
It's like,
I'm stronger than this. Like I can handle this.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm not depressed.
Yeah.
I think it's like those like bigger I think that's what I was saying earlier is like it's only gonna get harder. Like I think it's partially adulthood, and I realize not everyone has the privilege of just having these issues in adulthood.
Also,
but like as we get older, more things change, and it's like you just have more that you have to deal with, and it forces you to be like, you literally can't be like, I'm good.
Oh, totally.
We're not.
Because you're not. Yeah, you can't.
And I think it's like a beautiful challenge to like sit with pain and sit with fear and like think about that, how it's affecting you, and how like what your hope is to move forward.
And then like what we talked about a little bit is just like also going through stuff. It allows you to create more empathy or love, or create more fear or pessimism. So you have these two pendulum swings where it's like,
and it's your choice.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I hopefully, and I'm not this all the time because I'm definitely a little bit more pessimistic than I used to be, more logical, but I will say that I have so much more empathy for people that have gone through a divorce now after going through one.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't know their story. You don't know both sides. Both sides are probably right. Both sides are probably wrong. But I do know one thing. Both sides need a lot of love right now.
Right.
Which, growing up, it's like,
Right. You have.
You're getting divorced. That's like that's the person you're supposed to love the most, and you're leaving them. You know, it's all of this fear,
no context.
judgment,
Yep.
but like no empathy or love, or having, for me, like having an alcoholic mom. It's that's so complicated and hard. But a kid, you know, when I was growing up, that had like a dysfunctional parent.
Right.
I was a kid, you know, just like, this doesn't seem right. Like, why is?
Totally.
But then you go through it, and you're like, oh, I have gone through this too. Like, if you have a dysfunctional sibling or whatever, like now you can allow it to create love, empathy in your heart, or you can allow it to create like more dysfunction and all this stuff. Now it's a tangent again, but
no.
It takes a lot of work. It's
Yeah, it totally does. And I really do think I think it makes it so important to bring it, to cheesily bring it full circle. Like, it really does make it so important to like really realize like why, like, we need value in like what we're doing. Because if we're not, like, and it needs to be those little things. It needs to be those love moments. That guy at that show with 50 people.
Yeah.
Made, that may have been one of the smallest shows you've ever played, but one of the most important shows you've ever played. And I think it's just that reframing of why we're doing what we're doing into those things, into the hope and the love that we want to bring into this world. So
I think what you guys are doing is really beautiful. I'm really excited.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're having fun doing it. So
Yeah.
Cheers.
yeah. Cheers. Thanks for
Well,
doing
it's
this,
empty,
man.
but cheers.
Yeah. Time for the next one. Next round.
We're going out to dinner. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Dude, that was great, man.